Welcome to Voices of the Wild Earth. I'm Jane Fritz. Back in the late 1990s, I produced this story that is our last podcast for the year. Since we have lost funding from federal humanities and public media dollars, we're going to take a pause until we can secure more funding to continue. You, dear listener, can surely help us by donating whatever you can at our website, mythweaver.org. We thank you and are truly grateful if you do give. This is my original People and Trees that I produced in 1999 for a former national program out of Washington called Soundprint. I used a couple of my favorite segments in my second story about forests, also called People and Trees, that I produced for Voices of the Wild Earth in December of 2021. If you scroll back on our website or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it is our very first podcast. I think that one is a nice complement to this one, our 17th podcast. It's great to have so many stories about indigenous peoples and nature bookended by stories of my favorite people, trees. So after listening to this podcast, go back and listen to the second People and Trees. With autumn's chilly weather and changing colors, it's a perfect time to do some audio forest bathing. Enjoy.
Who would have thought that something as natural, as common, as simple as trees would ever become a source of controversy? Whether we live in the city or in the country doesn't matter. Trees are a part of our life and our language. We climb trees. We build houses in them as kids. We picnic under their shade. We decorate them at Christmas. We plant them. We cut them down. We try not to stand under them during thunderstorms. We speak of the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, of family trees. We use complimentary terms like conservationist or disparaging ones like tree hugger to describe people who take a passionate interest in trees. Whether viewed as symbols, resources, or commodities, trees mark a modern battleground. Some of them will live, and some of them will fall. Today's program, from producers Jane Fritz and Susan Davis, is called People and Trees.
I grew up in Ohio, in the country. My childhood playground was a native forest of poplar, beech, oak, and other hardwood trees. It was home to deer and raccoon. My large family wasn't a close-knit bunch like the Waltons on TV. I was often harassed by my older brothers, so Mom would support my occasional need to run away from home. Since I was just a little kid, she knew I'd venture only as far as the closely planted pine trees separating our place from the neighbors. She'd pack me saltines and a canteen of water, and I'd escape the world by crawling underneath the low branches of those cool, dark pines. Safe and alone, sometimes I'd curl up like a fox and sleep in the soft blanket of needles until Mom called me for supper. As a teenager, I'd seek the refuge of other trees, this time usually running away from my mother. I'd wander deep into that forest behind our home, walking along the bank of Swan Creek, to a bend in the stream where a huge sprawling oak tree still grows. I'd sit beneath it, knees to my chest, and cry. The tree was always so accepting of my adolescent angst. I still visit that old oak whenever I go back to the place I'm from. That's a black walnut tree.
Yeah, and that's a black walnut too.
And then there's a sycamore?
Yeah. Yeah, the sycamores are the bigger ones with the broadly palmated leaves that look like, that resemble maples. Oh, they're in the maple family.
You know a lot about the trees here.
A little bit, just from being out and running around in the woods since I was yay high. I can't really handle modern life too well.
A few summers ago, I met Scott Russell on the campus green of Ohio University, a college I attended in the mid-'70s. It was the first time I'd been back since then, and I just couldn't believe how the trees had grown. They now dwarf the old stone buildings. Scott's a soft-spoken country boy, tall and slim, with well-worn denim overalls and blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail. It's his first year of college. He's thinking of studying cultural anthropology, or maybe horticulture. He says the tall trees here keep him from being homesick for his family farm, which is surrounded by the rolling hills and hardwood forests of Appalachia, near the Ohio and West Virginia border.
I come up here every day. Being underneath the canopy here, to me it's always serene, no matter how busy it might be. There's that same serenity, no matter how much it's disrupted by human activity. Even when they're cutting the grass, usually through the day, I only have an hour to sit here, and it's the longest hour of the day. You just kind of lose touch with a lot of things, a lot of times, until the clock strikes the time, and the time that you have to leave, and then it's just back at it.
Do you think people appreciate what's here?
You can always tell the people that do appreciate it. They're always looking around, looking in the trees. They're not watching the sidewalk, trying to avoid eye contact with other people. And 9 out of 10 people don't pay any attention. They're so caught up in their routine that they can't separate themselves from it and take a look around at all.
Scott developed his passion for trees, exploring a virgin oak forest called Dysart Woods. Located in Belmont County, Ohio, Dysart Woods is all that remains of the vast primeval hardwood forest that was cut by settlers, clearing the land for farms, mines, and town sites. Preserved by several generations of the Dysart family, the 50-acre woods is now a nature preserve owned and managed by Ohio University.
Dysart Woods is significant because it's one of the last remnants of the type of forest that covered virtually all of what's Ohio now and in the Midwest. And if you can imagine the pioneers coming across the Appalachians and finding unbroken forests like this for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And Dysart Woods is one of the few pieces that remains of that forest.
I first visited Dysart Woods as a young college student Scott's age. I remember walking among the towering oak, beech, and tulip trees, acres of them, their cathedral-like presence overwhelming me at first. Then a cacophony of birdsong transformed the forest silence into a pleasing and welcoming sound. In 20 years, little has changed here, except that now the university employs caretakers, a married couple in their early 40s, Mitch and Ann Bartels. They live in an old farmhouse near the edge of the forest, with several dogs and cats. The Bartels jump at the chance to take me on a tour of the old growth.
People compare a cathedral and a forest, in the same sentence because of the high ceiling, the hushed feeling, the respect for what's around you. The music, that would be like too corny, I suppose. But I always come in here and just get reflective, immediately.
A lot of the large white oaks are dying, and nobody's sure if it's just a natural part of the life cycle or if it's something that man has done. But there's been so few chances to study an oak forest through its maturity that, quite honestly, there's still research being done on that.
Individual ornamental oak trees are abundant in yards and city parks, but a whole forest of oaks, especially old growth, and these trees are hundreds of years old, is very rare. Oak is considered a valuable source of lumber. As a hardwood, it's commonly used for making cabinetry, flooring, and furniture. So Dysart Woods provides a unique and critical study area, a valuable perspective on the natural cycles of a virgin forest managed with little human interference.
That's very hard for some people to understand because they visit this woods and they have to climb over tree trunks, sometimes several feet in diameter, and hike around them, and they really just don't understand why we don't cut those trees or clear those trails or drag the fallen logs out and sell them for timber. But that's what designates this as a virgin forest.
It's really hard to find the trail when all the leaves fall. I usually try to hike through before we have a group, and I couldn't find a couple of our markers, so I thought, well, I'll just see where usually people walk. Unfortunately, it was carpeted with leaves, and for a moment there I lost my bearings. I just stopped, and it was just like everywhere there was color, and I had no idea where I was.
Getting lost in a forest is possible, of course, but for some people, spending time in the woods can help them find themselves.
See, there's a lightning strike. See this spiral line coming down that tree?
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
That's lightning. Hit that tree long ago and spiraled around, made that scar. Those marks down there, and that little cedar, and this other cedar, you see how the bark's scraped? That's from a buck rubbing the velvet off his antlers.
Bill Martin sought the refuge of trees after the Vietnam War. He moved to the Cabinet Mountains of northwestern Montana from Berkeley, California. He was burned out on living in the city and fighting its steady encroachment into the natural world.
It's been really good for me. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was really disconnected, shall we say, from my society when I got out of there. I really didn't quite fit into what we're doing on this planet and the way we're going about doing it. And it's been really healing for me to find some place I can plug in to the planet, so to speak. It's where I live, and it's where I've made my living. You know, I've moved here to be in a more natural, healthy, sane surrounding. I like trees. I feel a certain affinity for trees. Trees are part of me.
How do you mean?
We depend on oxygen to survive. We can't last more than usually 5 minutes without it. And it comes from trees, largely. Plants. In general, I just love being out, walking about, and being part of it. I've been in it enough, working in it, learning about it. I've sort of integrated into it. I just feel like a squirrel or some kind of deer. Or I'm a creature of these woods. This is where I live. It's my native habitat. It's a connection to being part of this planet. I don't feel cut off by concrete and noise and electronics.
The forests in this part of Montana supply millions of board feet of dimensional lumber to the rest of the country for building homes. For the first 18 years that Bill Martin lived in Montana, he worked as an independent contractor for the U.S. Forest Service, planting new trees. His crew returned millions of conifer seedlings to the ground that had been clear-cut and couldn't regenerate on its own. Clear-cutting completely levels a forest and sometimes destroys the fragile soils and ground cover. Today, Bill's forest management work centers around a cedar hemlock forest that also grows Douglas fir, spruce, and birch trees. It's been his home for 25 years. He practices selective logging, cutting down certain trees and letting others grow so that one day there will be a grove of old-growth cedars for his grandchildren to enjoy.
It's pretty magical when you look at these living things here, this huge, this tall. And of course, they get much taller. They're transforming sunlight into life, making life possible for all the other life forms including us.
Several years ago, I went on retreat to the Benedictine monastery of St. Gertrude's in Cottonwood, Idaho. It's home to a small community of Roman Catholic nuns. The monastery sits high on a forested hill overlooking an agricultural prairie below. It's a peaceful setting that's shared with people who need healing or a break from the stresses in their lives. I came here because my father had just died after a prolonged illness, and I needed some spiritual comfort. The sisters agreed to let me sleep outdoors in the forest up the hill, as long as I stayed near the cemetery. So at dusk, I threw my sleeping bag down under the tallest of the ponderosa pines that stand like sentinels over the monastic community below. By day, this seemed a friendly place, but with darkness, the trees loomed over me, and the small white granite crosses that mark each grave created a visage in the moonlight that was both beautiful and eerie. I lay there, I suppose, a little afraid, when an owl landed on the branch above my head and gently hooted until I drifted to sleep. I slept well and awoke feeling somehow stronger and more at peace. Being at peace is in keeping with the philosophy of the Benedictine sisters here. They value tranquility, hospitality, and simplicity.
The tree is very rooted. It's in the ground, and so to me as a Benedictine that speaks of stability.
Sister Lillian Englert is the monastery's retreat minister.
The branches reaching upward, moving sometimes in the breeze, sometimes breaking off in the winter when we have heavy snows. There's the whole need for flexibility, bendability, and by being rigid, a Christian or a Benedictine or any person in the world, I think, is more likely to be broken. And so I see a tree reflecting that need in our world to be able to bend, to flex.
The steward and chief manager of the monastery's 1,000 acres of forest land is Sister Carol Ann Wasmuth. She had been teaching school for many years when she decided to come home to live several years ago. At the same time, the sisters were outlining a stewardship philosophy for the land they owned. In the past, the women had hired out all of the forestry duties. But Sister Carol Ann, in her late 50s, stepped forward to take on the task. She spent the next year in woodland management seminars and workshops, learning how to care for what the sisters call their hill of healing. And she learned to manage their much larger tract of income-producing forest land nearby.
The philosophy that we wrote some years ago as a community puts into words our belief that the land is a gift from God and that we have a responsibility to care for it, not only for ourselves, but to share it with those who come to share our monastic life with us, whether that's for a weekend or for months. This is our little section of the world that we're responsible for, and we need to be serious about taking care of it.
After marking and hiring out her first tree-thinning job, Carol Ann contracted breast cancer. Right after surgery and therapy, she returned to the woods. She says she knows God loves her because he gave her the woods before he gave her cancer.
I'm convinced that a good part of my healing came from being able to be outside in the woods. I'm fine now. All my doctor's reports are good. I am feeling great. And I just give a lot of credit to being able to go outside, work, do physical work in the woods, be around the trees, and also the whole thing of having something very important to get up in the morning to do. There is a healing, a strengthening that comes with being connected with the world around us and connected in a healthy way, a life-giving way. And so for me to be able to come up here and just feel the ground beneath my feet, feel the rough texture of the bark of the trees, and spend time working up here, doing what I could. The peace, the listening to the birds, the sunshine, the sound of the wind. That to me is so important.
For 20 years now, I've lived in the mountains of northern Idaho. The forests here are home to an abundance of native fish and wildlife. One morning years ago, I awoke from a nightmare about the forest around my home being logged so heavily that it looked like a nuclear wasteland. It was owned by a huge timber company, and the dream came true 5 years later. Facing bare ground where there was once a mature and diverse forest is pretty hard to take when you've known and been inspired by the beauty of huge cedar trees, pristine streams, and the smallest wild orchid at your feet. The land that had so richly inspired my creativity had been radically, if not permanently, altered. Author Rick Bass is well known for his collections of short stories like The Watch and nonfiction studies like The Lost Grizzlies. Rick also writes environmental essays, hoping to gain protection for the remaining unlogged forest wildland where he lives, in northwestern Montana, a mountain river valley called the Yak. It's interesting how he wound up here.
Just wandering, looking for a place that was remote and a place that had this feeling to it of a fit, which Yak did and still does. You know, it's so wet, so cold, so rainy, so dark. It doesn't strike you immediately as a place you would ever fit, but each year more and more I find myself fitting it. It's a real nice process. I really like the dark, dense woods and getting into them and exploring them.
How does that contribute to your writing?
Any landscape influences any artist or any person, I think, and certainly the landscape here is so strong and powerful and dominant that one instance would be of how maybe I'm trying to work more with subtlety in my stories, whereas earlier I didn't. I'm more aware of small things, I think, as a result of, well, in this country you have to move slower just because of its density, and as a result you may notice smaller things by moving more slowly. There are really 4 very distinct seasons here, unlike so many places in the world. I think living in the cycles of the seasons here is really affects my work in another way. There's just, in every direction, every dimension, the landscape, I do find it affecting my work.
Rick's writing studio is a one-room log cabin. You won't find a computer here, just a simple wooden desk and chair, an oil lamp, wood stove, and bookshelves heavy with books. A wolverine skin is spread out on a table in the center of the room. Rick writes all of his first drafts with pen and paper here during daylight hours. In the warm autumn sunshine, we stand outside the cabin along the edge of a marshy meadow. We're surrounded by a tall, dark forest.
You've got incredible diversity of trees, especially for this far north. You've got 3 species of pines growing with in the midst of cedar and hemlock forest. Doug fir, spruce, subalpine fir. The most common form of old growth in this valley is old growth larch, which is paradoxically the rarest form of old growth left in the West. It's a very rich, lush forest. That's one of the reasons it's being logged so hard, is because it grows big trees and grows them everywhere, all the way up over the top of the mountains and down into the river bottoms. We have less and less wild places where the systems of nature are proceeding at their own pace, in their own grace. This mass industrial logging that is going on up here, the road building and mass clear cutting, it has no respect for the place, it has no grace, it has nothing that's sustainable or, in my mind, honorable to it. It's heartbreaking to love a dense forest and see those dense forests being erased, scraped clean.
They're beautiful. Oh, Peggy, what are they called?
I don't know what those are. There's our...
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Big ones.
Big ones.
Look at those. Have you ever seen a pink like that? It's beautiful here. This is lovely. Thank heavens it's saved.
You don't have to be a writer, nun, or forester to love trees and want to care for them. And you don't have to have been raised around trees to be interested in them. On a rainy, cool October day, I joined 70 other adults of varying ages and lifestyles to tour a small part of a 1,000-acre old-growth cedar hemlock forest in northern Idaho that was saved from clear-cutting by a local environmental group. Leading the tour is Doc Partridge, a retired professor who taught forestry for 37 years at the University of Idaho.
I don't see any reason for the massive type cutting we've gotten into. I could take and make stewardship allocations for horse loggers here, and I could put 50 or 60 horse loggers on this land taking out timber for the rest of their lives. You wouldn't even know it was coming out, a bit at a time. The local economy would benefit, the forest would benefit, and everybody would. But I would demand that the person working there emulate precisely what had happened on that piece of land before he got there.
Horse logging is gentler on the land. Horses haul the trees out of the forest instead of trucks, eliminating the need for roads to be built. Doc taught forestry the usual way, breaking the ecosystem down into its economically useful parts. He regrets not having related all the intrinsic values of a forest to his university students. It might have made a difference, he says, with how woodlands are managed today.
I blame myself for not doing this years ago, and that is to develop in each person who works in the forest a sensitivity to everything out here, that everything indeed has a reason for being in here, a function, and that we have to be sensitive to the interactions if we're going to work out here and we're going to preserve it and yet utilize it at the same time. You know, I'm going to invent a new college of forestry, and when you come into my college of forestry, you're not allowed to use the word board foot. You're not allowed to use the word timber. You're not even going to hear about a tree until you're in the 3rd year. You're going to start building that forest with moisture and with carbon dioxide. That are the two things that combine in this world to form those trees and that vegetation. So this is how the whole system starts. So you're going to learn what the chemical composition of this whole thing is first, how life originates, how it goes on, and then you're going to talk about soils, the medium that's necessary for growth. And I'm not going to let you talk about just water holding capacities and mineral exchanges. I want you to tell me the name of every one of the organisms that lives in the soil.
Doc Partridge digs into the layers of organic material and soils beneath our feet to show us their depth and fertility. I think about the 3,000 to 4,000 years that it took to build this up from rotting and decaying trees. It's awesome to me, the interrelating communities of forest life. Soil microorganisms, insects, plants, birds, animals, and trees. And how I fit into the picture. One of the women on the tour has left the group and is lingering under an ancient cedar. There are tears in her eyes when I ask what she thinks about the tour and these trees.
The contrast between the clear-cut area and when we got into that next grove of old growth, to me there was a real palpable energy in the old growth of, I don't know, it's just this real strong sense that I had that these were ancient organisms and this was an ecosystem that was functioning and that this is what it was all about. And that clear-cut area was not what it was all about. That's the danger part. But I don't know. It makes me feel really sad. That's what I'm feeling right now. Is touching this tree, thinking that these old guys are gone, and I just feel incredibly sad.
Last year, around my yard, I planted a couple dozen pine and larch seedlings that Bill Martin gave me. It was my first experience at planting conifer trees. Several of them didn't survive the winter snows, but those that did are now knee-high and are bright with new green growth, the color of spring.
People and Trees, 1999, was produced by Jane Fritz. Our technical engineer was Justin Landrip. Thank you for listening.